and welcome to this Executive Insights discussion on aging care. I'm Lisa Benson, President and Publisher of Louisville Business First. Healthcare is a major economic driver across the nation, of course, but it's especially true in Louisville, where we have a number of organizations that specialize in the area of aging care. I have three top experts with me today to share their insights around the state of this critical segment of the economy. Let's go around the virtual room and meet them.
Good morning, Lisa. I'm Mary Haynes. I'm with Nazareth Home. We are proud to be here in Louisville since 1976. We currently have two campuses, continuing care retirement communities here in Louisville, and we provide a very robust short stay recovery care program, as well as all the sorts of programs people think of when they think of long-term care or nursing care. And we have personal care, which is kind of new in Kentucky, that is a more independent style of living, but still has support.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, good morning, Lisa. My name is Dr. Arif Nazir. I'm a geriatrician. I work with BrightSpring Health Services. BrightSpring is one of the nation's larger geriatric system providers, provide care services, which include all the way from pharmacy services to long-term care institution, also care to intellectually and developmentally disabled individuals, home health services, hospice care services, and also now primary care services across settings. In my role as Chief Medical Officer for Primary Care, I really help lead the provision of primary care services across settings for BrightSpring Health. Thank you for having me on the panel.
Welcome.
Good morning, Lisa. I'm Mary Lynn Spalding. I'm President and CEO of Christian Care Communities. It's an honor to be here with my colleagues here. Christian Care Communities has been around since 1884. It was founded in Louisville, Kentucky as a widows and orphans home. And through the years, it has grown and changed. And we exclusively, probably for about the past 20 years, focus on senior living. We have 11 campuses across the state. So we are the largest faith-inspired provider in the state of Kentucky. We have individuals that live in independent living all the way up to skilled nursing care. So we have a full complement of services. Another big part of the groups that we serve are affordable housing. So we do a lot in our Friendship House and Chapel House campuses to take care of those that are seniors that have found themselves in circumstances that need that affordable housing that's subsidized by government subsidy. I lead a team of about 800 people. They're all wonderful individuals. We've gone through a lot of challenging times recently, so it's great that we're spotlighting aging services and all the special people that provide those services out in the field.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thanks to all of you for making time for this discussion. You know, we've heard a lot in recent years about the impact of the aging baby boomer population and concerns over the strains it'll place on our healthcare system as they begin to need more aging care services. So let's go around the table and just hear from each of you about how your organizations are currently dealing with increasing demands of the senior population and how that's impacting your services. And Mary Lynn, let's start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Lisa. Well, it is a challenge because, quite frankly, there's more people to take care of than there are people to take care of them. And that's the basic fundamental of supply and demand. The reality is that our workforce is changing, and obviously the impact of COVID caused further changes in that particular workforce. But as far as Christian Care, what we have done specifically is to focus on workforce. We've taken our human resources department and we've divided it in half. And we've actually got someone that is our vice president of operations. Her responsibility is exclusively to work with individuals to make their jobs easier, to focus primarily on recruitment and retention. We still have a very robust human resources department that looks at more tactical things like benefits and compensation and those type of things. But what we have been able to find is that through the pandemic, we lost a lot of people, as did many individuals. and many organizations. So basically what we're wanting to make sure is that those people that have remained in the healthcare industry feel good about what they're doing. We have had to use agency staffing, and you've probably heard much about that. That's a challenge for many organizations, but I'm really proud to say today that we have significantly reduced, if not eliminated, agency staffing in over 90% of our campuses. And we've done that on the ones. We've done that by listening to our employees, by reacting to what their needs are, and to try to develop programs and services that will wrap around those needs to make sure that they continue to enjoy this industry.
Yeah, I think workforce is going to be a big part of our discussion here today. Dr. Nazir, let's go to you next. What impacts are you seeing from the increasing baby boomer population?
Well, surely, as Mary kind of said it really well, I mean, everybody's just trying to figure out, who are the people going to provide the care. We just have significant resignations, as you know, and there you hear concepts like quiet quitting and all those issues just are real for us in day-to-day life. So I think we all have to think really outside the box. And of course, BrightSpring, as I said, has many service lines from pharmacy to hospice to home healthcare, so forth. But I'm really going to focus on more on the primary care side because that's where I'm more engaged. So I think the answer is experimentation. One thing which I'm really enjoying in my role is that we have a really cascade of services that are available. And as a primary care leader, what I'm really busy in with the help of other leaders at BrightSpring is like, how can we create more efficiency and more fun for frontline teams? I think that is where we need to be redesigning our healthcare systems. I see that a lot of us kind of just sit and wait for policymaker to bring more dollars or to make some policy change before we can think differently. But at BrightSpring, we really are challenging ourselves. Like, how can we, in the current environment, think more innovatively on how teams can get better help? And one example I'll give you is like, we really are looking at how do frontline practitioners and consultant pharmacists can actually work together so they can make their lives easier and more fun and meaningful. So there are many interesting experiments that we are leading at this point to create more value, to extract more value out of the same environment we have. We are also trying to be very innovative in how we engage our frontline staff, listen to them more, as Mary said, and really pay attention to what their needs are. And finally, the role of tech and data. We're trying to explore that. Now, I will talk a whole lot more about it later, and I'm sure in this conversation, is that tech and data is not everything, right? Actually, tech and data, if not paid attention to, can actually create more burden for the front line. So we need to be very cautious in how we use it. So I think we need to do a whole lot of work in regards to experimentation around for the well-being of the frontline team first. And once we have figured that out, then we can think about more tech and innovation and so forth. So I'm very excited that we are using this tough time to really redesign how care is being delivered. And we are seeing a lot of successes.
Excellent. I can't wait to dig a little bit more into that with you later. Mary, talk a little bit about how this is playing out at your organization. What's your perspective on this?
Looking at the growth in the marketplace, we're looking at our services to be more designed to what people are really wanting. Short is what people want because they really want to be at home. So we're looking at how to diversify what we do to serve that short stay person. For us, the Recovery to Home program has always been very robust. We're great at that. U.S. News and World Report listed us this past year as in the top 10 skilled nursing in the country. So that's something we're good at, and we want to stay in that because we believe that even as home becomes the hub of healthcare, there will still be needs for skilled nursing. So we're streamlining those programs and looking at shorter length of stay at the same time. The whole diversification of the inventory, as we heard Mary Lynn speak about all the different communities they're in and the different services that they provide. We're here in Louisville, so we're always looking at what do we do really well up against what other people are doing well and making those decisions about where's the best place for us, knowing that Most authorities say that 1 out of 4 people are going to intersect with a long-term care subacute provider at some point. So there's definitely a place for all of us in the market, and decisions are best strategically on what you can best provide. And that's what we're noodling on.
1 in 4, that's a staggering statistic. Thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
Well, workforce, of course, is a challenge across industries. It's part of just about every conversation I have these days. But healthcare jobs have been particularly challenged over the last several years. So let's talk about how your workforce has changed since the pandemic and what strategies you're using specifically to adapt to address those workforce challenges. Dr. Nazir, why don't you take this first?
Yeah, so a great question. Again, just referring more towards our frontline primary care teams and the staff we work with in the nursing home, the ALF setting. Their needs and demands are changing as they should, particularly since the pandemic, right? I mean, everybody's demanding more flexibility and so forth, and everybody's seeing that. So I think how we are responding to that is really trying to think about how can the vision statement or the mission statement of the work we do for our company has to include staff well-being as the key thing. I think it even has a place before we say anything about the patient care, right? I mean, to me, a good, meaningful vision statement has to be that we believe in the best possible world for our frontline staff so that they can provide the best possible care, because best possible care is otherwise just going to be a dream. So I think everybody needs to sincerely believe in that. And then you need to really have a very clear strategy. And for me, that strategy is purpose. Most of the people who want to work on the front line really do it because of a purpose and a mission. And I think with all the regulatory structures and all the other burdens we put on people, that purpose apparently gets lost somewhere. I go to nursing homes and I see my nurses and my nurse practitioner work, and so many times they're just being a servant to a regulatory checklist. That is not why they became a provider or a clinician or a nurse. They really wanted to have an impact. So what we are really trying to look at and really trying to do some good inquiry from our front line is like, what does purpose mean to them? How can we make them believe there's a purpose? And one thing we have figured out that they need to be better team members. They need to know that the nurse practitioner that is coming in is their colleague, is their team member, and they work together. And then they need to know their outcomes. They need to have data right at their fingertips to know what kind of impact they've had, how many hospitalizations they have prevented, how many dollars they have saved the healthcare system, because that is as important also. So we are really looking at many ways of creating more teamwork, more meaningful dashboards that are not 60, 30, 90 days old, but really as old as yesterday, so they can actually take action, learn from those things, and provide better care at the very next day. So we're really doing some interesting experiments which are really working well in that regard. So yeah, so those are just some of the key strategies we have been working on.
Those are great. Thank you for sharing. Mary Haynes, I'll bring this to you next. How are you all working to adapt to the workforce of today? What are the strategies you're using?
Thank you. Redesign, I think, is where we all are in both our existing programs and the way we relate to the community, and certainly the role of the team members. So during COVID, I think a lot of people really enjoyed being at home. In the direct care world that we're in the service world, we don't have a lot of jobs that folks can do remotely, yet at the same time, we're called to try to make our positions afford people more time off. So we've looked hard at redesigning and listening to the people that are at work. What works for you? So we've shortened some shifts to 4 hours. We've lengthened some shifts to 12 and 16. So it's really listening to people and trying to find the best way for them to contribute in the way that they do. And as Dr. Nazir said, and Mary Lynn would echo, in our world, in the mission-driven world, we have such meaningful work, and we have opportunity to listen and redesign that work. We also have enacted our foundation to fund scholarships. We're looking at ways to help people stay at work And upskilling is, of course, a new buzzword if you want to get into some buzzwords, but really looking at the people that have made a commitment to be and to be present and to be here and to give. How can we expand their giving? How can we create a better life for them at work and also build the organization? We've developed apprentice programs. We're in a grant with the Department of Labor that identifies how to build skills, increase competency in the workplace, and also provide some wraparound services. You know, for us, we're a workforce of women, and these women are very burdened. They're raising their family, maybe another. And many of them are working other places too. So to try to help them only work at one place, I think is something that we've been very devoted to. How can we improve their work life? So we're all in it together, right? We're all in it together, and listening to the people that make that commitment to our ministry and mission and the people we serve. That's who we want to be in business with. So what helps people helps business. And that's something we're really living into.
Absolutely. Mary Lynn, what about you? The scope of your operations is significant. What strategies are you using that are working?
Well, I think several things, but to sum it up in one word, it's intentionality. And what I mean by that is that splitting these two departments separately has really created the opportunity for intentionality. In healthcare, we like acronyms. I don't know why, but there's tons of them. So when we focus on retention, we've done something called an EAR meeting. An EAR stands for Employee at Risk, because each one of our employees has a different story. And the reality is that they may have a different need. So to Mary's point, some people may want to advance their career, others are just getting by. So we need to be sensitive as an organization to make sure that we understand that and we react to that appropriately. So these EAR meetings happen with regular frequency and looking at our individuals. And we've kind of mirrored it on the clinical side. We had something that we would have clinically at risk. That was an individual that was older that was at risk for falls or something like that. So this is the same type of thing, just extrapolating that principle. What we have seen is that our biggest risk area is in the first 90 days of employment. We have launched a huge CNA initiative training program. So we offer that, as do many organizations, but we offer that across the state. A lot of those individuals, this is their first entry into healthcare. And the populations that we serve, at times, it's difficult work. It is very difficult work. And so, with that said, sometimes it can be frightening to individuals. So, we really focus on that first 90 days of employment to get people onboarded, to have them have a sense of community and a sense of team through these employee at risk surveys. And then back to the use of technology, we want data real time. We want it fast. We want to be able to use it. So we have real time surveys. So what happens is that we push surveys out to all of our staff and they can respond, and they're going to get less than a 24-hour response to whatever their issue is. So that if there weren't enough medical supplies in the medical supply closet last night, their leader is going to know that. They're going to replenish that. And when they come back to work the next night, they're going to be there and they're going to have what they need. But I think, again, it all flows through intentionality. The second thing I would say is caring and compassion. If we want care and compassion from our staff for our elders, which is, I think, what many, many elders do want, we've got to be caring and compassionate to them. We have something called the Heart to Heart Fund. And what happens is that an individual can submit a specific acute need, and we can fund that up to $1,000 for that individual almost instantaneously. What that does for people is that they sometimes live beyond their means. And so if they need a car repair, we had a lot to do with the Western Kentucky tornadoes and things like that. Any sort of crisis that occurs, they can get some sort of response quickly. It does go through a committee. We do have a process for it, but it lets them know we care about them. The other neat thing about that is that our employees actually contribute to that fund. So that means that they care about their team members. So they may not need those funds at a particular point in time, but one of their team members might, and they've contributed to that.
That's a great program. Thank you for sharing. You know, Mary Lynn, you talked about these are hard jobs, right? They're not for everybody. And keeping people engaged in their work has to be tough. Dr. Nazir, I noticed that you used the word fun. So I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about how you are strategizing around engagement and keeping your employees engaged in their work so they're happy and having that fun.
Yeah, so we lead almost 100 nurse practitioners in very tough environments, such as nursing home, ALF, and senior living. And the day-to-day burden can really lead to a lot of monotony and being tiredness and questioning like why I'm doing that. So we have to keep them engaged. And I think the most important thing which I believe in is that we as leaders have to be more engaged with them in the front line for them to be engaged more. So that is something which we always believed in, but I think since the pandemic that just has become a big focus for me personally. For example, I've opened up a day in my work is where I spend it in the field now, where I spend a few hours with the nurse practitioner one day, with another nurse practitioner the other day, and through them I also spend the day with the nursing home team. This morning actually I was with the nursing home team, and we did a lot of learning and education together as a grand round where we reviewed patients together and so forth, and that has really given me my personal purpose back to be more engaged with the frontline team. And we try to keep these grand rounds fun. People are laughing, there's jokes around, and that is the best way to learn and educate. So those are some of the strategies which I'm engaging in personally, because now I'm finding some hidden value which I just couldn't see as clearly as before. So we're going to be doing, again, these experimentation will lead to a whole change of our models. Like if Arif Nazir and Julie can have so much fun on the front line rounding together, why can't Dr. Smith and the other team members can have that? So again, I think there's so much more which we are not getting value from is day-to-day teamwork. We need to redesign how people engage. So really our focus in that. Another thing which my executive team is doing now, which we never did before, was that every quarter we now are setting up Zoom meetings with a group of practitioners who are kind of in the same geography, so they feel like they're a team. And we get on the phone, like on the camera and Zoom or a Teams meeting with them, and really try to understand what their challenges are, a little bit about their family life, and we share our family life stories with them to really create that engagement and intimacy. And that has been received so well. And I believe that I know a whole lot more about my team members that I didn't know before. So those are just some of the very crucial strategies which we're working on, which I think are really paying off well.
That's great. And they're small things, right? They're not hard things. It's just you have to be intentional about doing it.
Yeah.
Mary, I'll bring this to you next. Burnout is something that I know is something your workforce deals with. How are you working on re-engaging employees?
Obviously, we're in the relationship business, so we've always been in relationship with our staff, and COVID really challenged that and caused us to look at tech differently and look at software platforms, and we embrace those, and now they've been tremendous. And just as Mary Lynn was mentioning about the push notifications, we have a software platform called Engage that does that push out randomly multiple times a day, just checking in on people. How are you feeling? And you get that quick response. And it allows us to really take the temperature of what's going on under the roofs and be able to address that much quicker. I think that our work has so much meaning, and being able to really affirm the meaning that it has. So we've probably done a better job of listening to the people we serve, getting their feedback, and getting the provider in that conversation. So while we've always known that our relationships are our secret sauce, I think right now we are really living into that and lifting up those whoever on the team, uh, who gets you that cup of coffee. We have a little measuring stick right now about our environment, about how easy or hard is it for anybody under any of our roofs to get a cup of coffee. And that, it may sound funny, but everybody can relate to it because it really tells a story. It tells who's important to you, how easy is the system to use, is it personal, who has power, where's the level playing field. So I think to Mary Lynn's word, intentionality, and to Dr. Nazir's word, well-being, I think COVID has caused us to really prioritize some of the things that we thought we were good at. So we had a great foundation, but now we're really living into that, and it's making a real difference.
Absolutely. Mary Lynn, I'll come to you next with this question on re-engaging employees.
I appreciate that, and I so appreciate my colleagues. I should officially share that Mary Haynes has been a colleague, a mentor, and a friend for many years. And I think that re-engagement starts with trust.
Mm.
When Christian Care had its first case of COVID, quite frankly, Mary Haynes was one of the first people that I called to say, how are you dealing with that? So when you're looking to re-engage people and to have them stay with your organization, they first have to trust.
Mm.
They have to trust their team. They have to trust their organization. And then I think the second piece of it is they need to be proud of who they're working with and working for. And so that helps a lot. But for Christian Care, we have 2 campuses specifically that are in the Louisville area. One, we truly take care of individuals that are very challenged. Our downtown campus, we have a lot of folks in independent living that prior to moving into independent living have been homeless. And as many people know, there's a huge homeless problem and challenge in the city of Louisville. I think a lot of people look at people that are homeless as individuals that are younger, but that happens to seniors as well. So if you can imagine the burnout rate for our staff in trying to meet those needs, very large needs are huge. And then we have another campus in Middletown, but we have a lot of folks there that have dementia, which again is another challenging population. So when you look at how do we engage and re-engage, I think it's employee appreciation. I think it's trust. I think it's listening. And as Dr. Nazir said, it's just finding the fun. Some days it's harder to find that fun, but we challenge all of our leaders that are out there to take a minute to step back and to really do that. And then last, but probably most importantly for Christian Care, our foundation is spiritual care. And so with that said, we have full-time chaplains, and many times they pick up on issues that individuals are having, and they're able to lean in a different way. So we have a full-time chaplain at our downtown campus. We also have a full-time chaplain at our East End campus, and those individuals can engage with people and really help to reduce and prevent that burnout.
Those are good tips for all employers across the board. So let's turn our attention to a different topic for a minute, the money question. This issue is the issue that is often top of mind among providers of aging support and care is payment for services, of course. And this month, a national article reported that over 60% of long-term care providers are underwater. So what's the outlook for balancing that increased need for services and the difficult financials? Mary, I'm going to let you take that one first.
Oh, great.
A big question.
I'm so glad. It is on all of our mind. COVID brought, we were hopeful that COVID would shine a spotlight on us for the value of what we bring to our community. That spotlight was pretty bright, and it had a variety of impacts. One is, I'm not certain that it made folks want to be under a roof. It made them want to be home where they had more control. And of course, that's always been the trend that here in the US is for care at home. So often we're in a competitive situation for that dollar, whether that federal or state dollar goes to home or goes to brick and mortar. And the trend is to home and not to those of us that provide congregate living and very safe, as Mary Lynn just talked about, settings that keep people whole, where there is well-being and a sense of security. So it is a competitive situation that we're in for the federal and state dollar. Here in Kentucky, many long-term care centers are very dependent upon Medicaid. We've not had a real increase in Medicaid in about 10 years. So right now we're very much in an advocacy position. Every one of us on this call this morning have been advocating with our elected for the last 6 months to try and rebase Medicaid in Kentucky to make that rate more comparable to the increase in wage. Folks mentioned percentages such as wages have increased 30%. I think most of us would say food has increased about 14%. So, and of course, our care of the people on the team, as we've talked about here today, being the number one reason that we will sustain as an organization is that we can build team and afford them a quality of life in the marketplace. So to keep up with that, we're at a very painful intersect with income and expense. And so we're grateful for the chance to talk about it because it is a community problem. It's not a provider problem. These are really decisions that communities have to make about what sort of care and provision and environments that will be existing in the community as we see the aging group grow. So the World Health Organization says that ageism is a real threat to the health of every community, and that 1 out of 2 people in America right now have ageist attitudes. It's kind of a soapbox for me, so you may want to cut me off here shortly. But I think we are a workplace of females. We are a workplace of folks who don't have many advantages. And I'm always ready to stand in the public square and advocate for the people who work with folks who are aging in our country and also those who are aged. And I think it's important to use every platform we can to raise that issue up, at least for discernment, if not
Absolutely.
solution.
Dr. Nazir, I'm going to bring this to you next to talk about from the primary care perspective.
Yeah, sure. I mean, man, Mary has just put me in that kind of mood also. It's about how sad it is that we have such ageist attitudes, unfortunately, in our communities. And you really, I mean, the poor funding is just really outproduct of that. I mean, when you have, nursing homes closures and AL closures at a bigger risk than other institutions like casinos and restaurants, then you have a problem in your society. I mean, you know what you value more in your society. Like, I mean, there should never be a situation where a nursing home or AL should be at risk of closure because they are really doing the noble work of taking care of the most deserving people. And to me, it's heartbreaking as a physician when I see my operational partners, no matter what company we work with at BrightSpring, it is just, I mean, our operational leaders are working, I would say 60, 80, 100 hours a week just to make this business be viable. And that is just really hard for me to see. So the commitment I have as a physician leader at BrightSpring Primary Care CMO is that we will do anything to be respectful of that. And one example is that I truly believe that medical directors should not be paid what they're paid, unless they show value. So I have been a biggest advocate of that. Is like, what is the value physicians can bring to these homes? Are they really bringing that value? So I think as physicians, we need to see how we are partnering with these very, very constrained, resource-strapped institutions and really being a partner in that. So BrightSpring, we are coming up with new models where physicians, practitioners are not just a vendor who just go in the building to pick up revenue and make visits. We really want to make the life of our frontline teams easier so that we can extract more value together from a system, right? Things that a nurse practitioner or physician can do, they should be doing that, right? I mean, they should be entering those orders. They should be writing those notes. Why should a nurse who's so busy doing so many other things should be dependent upon those tasks when they don't even get paid for those things, right? So I always tell my frontline team and nurse practitioner and physician medical directors, any single time a revenue dollar is generated, I want you to think about what was the value you gave back to your team member and to your resident. We just need to do this math in our mind and be very ethical on every single dollar that we get paid for any service we provide. So I'm very, very much focused on that. At BrightSpring Primary Care, we are creating new teamwork processes to bring more value. We are really redesigning the role of the medical director. It shouldn't be just at a stated dollar amount every month. It should be dependent upon value. And I'm just very hopeful that with the value-based transition that we are going into, hopefully that will help us design new ways of looking at things so that we can at least use the same dollars in a better way by redesigning. So I think nursing homes and assisted living finally getting some control over these dollars through the value-based systems like the iSNP and the eSNP programs, the ACO models, I think gives me hope, because finally we can actually have some more control on how we want to redesign some of these models of care. So
That's great to hear. Thank you, Dr. Nazir. And he used some of those acronyms that you were mentioning, Mary Lynn there. Mary Lynn, what will you add to this conversation?
Well, I think that both Dr. Nazir and Mary have been very eloquent in what they were sharing. I'm probably not going to be as eloquent because I'm going to say we're in crisis. And I think until our society recognizes that we're in crisis and accepts that word, we will not get the speed and the call to action that we need. The reality is that you're correct, Lisa. There's a lot of closures of skilled facilities, of personal care homes, of all of those types of things that are happening across the Commonwealth. And don't forget where I started. We've got more people to take care of than we have people to take care of them. So where are those people going to go as these closures continue, as these changes continue, and who's going to take care of them? And that's our reality. So with that said, I think everyone has good intention. Maybe one of the things about doing this for a long time, and I've been doing this for over 25 years, the reality is that I've seen healthcare change. I saw that when there was a time in healthcare that there were dollars to do innovative things, and they were available, and the care was enhanced and people were happy. And then I've seen these times, which are the scarcity. One of the things that Mary mentioned is what COVID looked like. And I think our challenge is that when COVID hit, not only healthcare workers, but firefighters and police officers and all of these frontline individuals were viewed as heroes. But unfortunately, we're not putting the dollars back to those heroes. And I think, again, until we realize that we're in crisis, we're not going to get the call to action that needs to happen quickly enough to bring the subsidies to where they need to be in order to avert this crisis.
And on top of that financial crisis, we also have a scarcity in geriatricians. So let's talk a little bit about that and how that's impacting our region's ability to care for this aging population, and what kinds of things are being done to address it, if anything. Dr. Nazir, I'll let you talk about that first.
yeah, I mean, I would add to that is not just a geriatrician crisis. We have a gerontology crisis. I mean, you talk about CNAs who are experts in taking care of the older. Talk about the nurses, right? I mean, talking about psychiatrists, talking about social workers, right? Anybody in the field of gerontology, we are just absolutely lacking. Talking about a geriatrician, being a geriatrician myself, I know we are almost 30,000 geriatricians short where we need to be, and there's just no hope. And there's no hope because there's no policy decision being made where it's really an added advantage, or even just at an average level of advantage to really go into these fields. I absolutely believe that policymakers have their work cut out for them to really incentivize people to take these very tough professions, right? I mean, why Do we have incentives to be a cardiologist or somebody who does interventions or all that? Nothing wrong with those professions. We need those too. But I think it's just because those are highly paying and highly recognized specialties. I think geriatrics, gerontology, geriatricians, all those should be incentivized because it is a very, very hard job to provide high quality geriatric care in any setting. So I think we have our work cut out for us. Louisville is no different than the country. We absolutely are struggling in regards to, I can actually probably count on my one hand how many geriatrician colleagues we have, and they're stellar geriatricians, and we're really honored to have them, but we need more. But unfortunately, we just lack the incentives to really make young physicians in their career to make those decisions that they want to spend their life in geriatrics. And the media, because we're doing this panel for the media. Media needs a role to play, which has to be positive. Why? I mean, I published this story through one of the peer-reviewed journals 3 years ago that 80% of the news that come out from the media about geriatrics is all about disasters and negativity. Why do we have to focus on that when millions of things happen every day in our nursing homes, assisted livings, and geriatric centers, which are absolutely noble, like all the hugs and the kisses and the help, which is not part of the job description of CNAs, happen every single day. I see that happen. No surveyor ever makes a note of that on their sheet. The only thing they make a note of is what? Out of those 1,000 hand washes they had to do, they forgot one, and that becomes the source of problem for everything, and then that gets in the news. What kind of approach are we taking towards really publicizing geriatrics? It's just beyond me at this point. So I really appreciate you guys for this panel, because I think this absolutely is needed, that we need to talk about the beauty and the benefits and the attraction of this field. So we have a lot of work to do. And we just can't say enough about that.
Absolutely. Very important conversation. Thank you for bringing that to light. Mary Lynn, do you agree about Dr. Nazir's comments? Do we need more incentives? How do we let more people know that these jobs are good jobs?
Well, I think it is getting support from the media, and I think these types of opportunities are wonderful. I think continuing to have those success stories always helps, and I think that attracts more folks into that field. But I think that the other piece of it is recognizing that we respect the aging population. We talked earlier about ageism. Many cultures are very respectful of the aging population. And quite frankly, the older that I get, the more that I recognize that I want to be respected, as do we all. So the reality is that I think that we have to continue to push for that and to really look at that, because that needs to be a revered and honored position, not, oh gosh, I'm a CNA, a certified nursing assistant. It should be, oh my goodness, you got your certified nursing assistant license. That's an amazing job. And we just have to have that paradigm shift occur in our society.
Mary Haynes, I'll bring this to you next. What would you add?
I think, of course, ditto to everything that was said on the payment side and the value that's placed, the economic value. But I always want to push that it is a balance of compassion and competence. And I think our field often is represented as not requiring as much competence as it truly does. I mean, there is an expertise that really makes a difference. So in an aging community here in Louisville, if we're going to say we're the center of aging and wellness, oh my goodness, then what is the science? What's the foundation that really makes that a real statement? And it'll be a real statement when there is a wealth of professionals who are convicted and committed in the science of aging wellness. Part of that ageism is nobody wants to be old. Everybody wants to be healthy. So if that's what the culture is asking for, then let's do better at lifting up professionals who have made it their life commitment to know the science and the expertise of aging well. Let's put a dollar on that.
Bravo, that's well said. Well, let's take a look at the future for a minute. What do you all see as the next big shift that's coming in aging healthcare? Are there new innovations that you all are keeping your eye on? Dr. Nazir, I'll let you look in your crystal ball first and tell us what you see is coming.
Sure. I think all of us as executive leaders probably will feel this right now that over the last few years, we've just seen a barrage of innovators just coming in the industry. Like every week, I have emails, which I unfortunately have to delete because I don't have time, from innovators reaching out because they find that they have found the big solution to fix healthcare. And many of them, unfortunately, come really from a place where they have not been in the setting, really they have not engaged much with the older people. They're really just coming from really a tech point of view. So I think there's going to be a whole lot of noise that we have to deal with. But we will very quickly will have to figure out what is true and what is noise. I probably think the balance is like 95% is noise and 5% is really where you have true solutions. So I think all of us health leaders who are present here this morning have our job cut out for us to really find a way to really help those 5% meaningful solutions, bring them to the front. Now, those 5% solutions that are going to be meaningful are going to be related around AI, helping decisions to be made better at the bedside, robotics to help our staff, which we don't have, to do the hard, heavy lifting jobs, for example, creating flexibility in schedules, remote patient monitoring, which is meaningful, not just noise, because right now we're dealing with so much noise around the remote patient monitoring. Everybody has a remote patient monitor. Unfortunately, all those things at this point are clunky. The Wi-Fi or the cellular technologies don't work. There's too much data that is hard to make sense out of. It is really making the frontline teams frustrated because now they have to deal with all this data. They're worried about lawsuits now because they didn't address something abnormal. So there's just so many issues that are going on. To me, all these tech problems right now are kind of band-aids. We really need to figure out the science of geriatrics and teamwork, which Mary kind of talked about. How does a doctor behave with a CNA that it is uplifting for the spirit of the whole team? How does a consultant pharmacist really bring value to a director of nursing and a physician as a team member, rather than pleading for them to make a change after something was happened and nobody paying attention to their recommendations? So we have so many opportunities in very basic day-to-day teamwork and interaction and engagement with each other. So I think that is where the innovation needs to happen, is how we act to be a better team. How do we teach and train and add value to each other? How we have more fun together. And once we kind of figure that out as better team members, then absolutely we need to figure out the AI, the robotics, and the remote patient monitoring. So all is good, but we just have to be very cautious and make sure that in our effort to install technology, we just do not burden the front line anymore. I just want to make sure we are very careful with that.
Absolutely. That's something that, I don't think people talk about all the time, but that's really interesting to think about when you have all that data, that can be a real burden in and of itself. So, Mary Haynes, what about you? What innovations are you keeping your eye on, either on the technology side or on the human side?
Yeah, so tech is definitely an advantage, but it is an explosion right now. And as Dr. Nazir says, most of us have some affiliation here in Louisville with the Thrive Center. And I've been on the board of the Thrive Center since we began. And our goal there is to find the right intersects that represent both the consumer, the provider, and the entrepreneur, and to bring that conversation closer. So the tech that is available is actually what I call a workforce spare. I want it to save time, not make more time and intensity. And many of the things, just as Dr. Nazir says, many of the entrepreneurs, they have not been in the space, so they don't know what we have already. They don't know what is really needed. And a lot of what they create at home is not as useful as we would want it to be. But I think when you ask about innovation, it is going to be using those processes that are currently in place to try to make them more streamlined, more meaningful. We are human beings, will always be human beings as we age. That is not going to change. So it really is coming up with descriptions of how can we do that best and those best practices and bringing people together to define that, doing that collaboration. So I think the word that I keep wanting to pair with innovation is collaboration and strategic partnerships. And I think that when we look at the complexity of the environment, the lack of payment in the environment, the struggling expertise, we're going to have to collaborate and find strategic partnerships to develop best practices. And we're going to have to take those things to home, because home is going to be the hub of life and aging and wellness. And we've got to find ways to intersect around that.
Mary Lynn, I'll let you have the final word on innovation. Do you agree with Mary and Dr. Nazir?
I very much agree with what they're saying. I think that the only thing that I could possibly add to their remarks is just the whole notion of blending our historical knowledge with looking at the future. And I totally agree with Dr. Nazir. There's a lot of noise there right now, which tends to overcomplicate things. So from our vantage point, at least for Christian Care, we're getting back to basics and we're focusing on that interdisciplinary team and then using the innovation that comes through technology, the choices that people want to make, whether they want to be in an institutional setting or whether they want to be in the home. But having that interdisciplinary team come at these issues from all different angles to come away with something that's going to be useful to that elder. So that's been our big focus. Used to be, we would call it strategic planning. I think we're at the juncture right now that we're unfortunately faced with sustainability planning and coupling that with some of the strategic work that we're doing. So I describe it to people, it's like driving with one foot on the accelerator and the other foot on the brake. And we're doing a little bit of that right now too.
Well, we are just about at the end of time for our discussion today. I wanted to just go around the table and see if there's anything that we didn't talk about today that you think is important for Business First audience to understand. Dr. Nazir, I'll give you last remarks.
Well, I'm just gonna promote the power of reflection, which means that we all need to look at ourselves, that how can we bring more value? I mean, before we complain, and we should, because there's a big issue, but before that complaint, we just need to look on our own conduct and see what else can I personally do to really improve the care of the people which I'm responsible for. Am I being a good team player? Am I being a role model? Am I creating learning opportunities for the others? Am I being respectful? Am I being patient? Am I listening to my patients, or I'm just cutting them off in 10 seconds like most of people do? So I think there's so much we all can do with our personal conduct to be at our best behaviors, because we are privileged to be in this position, be frontline, be an executive team member. It's such an honor to be in the place we are, to provide the care we to our older and most deserving. So let's just look at our own conduct and see we can be the best version of our own selves.
Thank you so much. Mary Haynes, what's your big takeaway for us?
I think thinking about the environment of care, that's been something that I've been encouraging in every group that I've been in. Systems theory is something that I live in. And so I think that the only way we're going to find solutions is to really look at what's dragging us down. And whether it's individually, as Dr. Nazir is saying, or what in the system is making it not succeed. And that's why my earlier rant on the ageism and the impression. So I think the impression of aging and the impression of the individuals who are involved in that expertise really deserves lifting up. So I wouldn't have done my job here today if I hadn't talked about our environments And that is that they are great to live in, they're great to work in, they're great to play in. We represent our community. So if we all think that Louisville is a center of aging and wellness, then we are a part of that. We're all a part of that. And how can we work collectively, collaboratively? How can we share to make that better for every person who's in that niche? Because that niche represents who we are. And I think it's a great one. I think aging and wellness services here in Louisville are great. And we all share in that. And it's something to, as Mary Lynn used that word, sustain. So how can we grow it? How can we lift it? How can we make it better?
Absolutely. Thank you. And Mary Lynn, I'll give you the very last word.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks for the time today. I think that where I come away with is that my professional career has been spent in the city of Louisville. Although I've traveled to different states and things like that, but I always come back home. And what home means to me is that in Louisville, as a community, we care for one another. We have that history. We're a very inviting, I always call it a big small town, because we're very inviting. But I think that the thing we underestimate is that we have a lot of very, very bright minds in senior living, in senior care, in innovation. And I think we just need to continue to leverage that, because that gives me faith and hope in the future. And I think all of us should take heart in that Louisville is very strong in this area. We do a lot of collaboration. We care for one another. And I think that not only the folks that are on this particular panel, but a lot of others in the community are very, very strong in this area. So I think in that regard, we're very blessed and we have a bright future.
Well, thank you so much. That brings us to the end of our discussion today. I want to thank our panelists so much for joining in this conversation and sharing your insights into such an important sector of our community. Thank you all for sharing your time.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.